These items cost more than you'd make in a year. People like you don't belong in Aurora Jewelers. The words sliced through the silence like jagged glass, hanging in the air for everyone to hear. Inside the pristine, high-ceilinged showroom of the Fifth Avenue flagship store, time seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Some customers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking between the speaker and his target. Others observed with quiet satisfaction, as if watching someone finally be put in their place. The man who had spoken stood tall and composed, arms crossed over his tailored charcoal blazer. His silver hair was meticulously combed back, and his icy gray eyes narrowed with unmistakable disdain. This was Colin Prescott, the store manager, an old hand in luxury retail who wore arrogance like a badge of honor. He exhaled slowly, then pointed toward the exit with two well-manicured fingers. "Jackson, please escort this gentleman out. He's disturbing the atmosphere." The so-called disturbance was a softly spoken black man in his early 40s, dressed simply in dark jeans, a navy sweater, and modest leather shoes. He had done nothing but inquire calmly about a $75,000 pink diamond pendant displayed under polished glass. That was all it took to unleash this tirade. As the uniformed security guard approached with obvious hesitation, Colin's thin lips curled into a smug smile, as if this scene were not only routine, but necessary. Customers watched closely now, some with growing unease, others hiding condescending smirks behind crystal champagne flutes. But no one in that store could have foreseen what was about to happen next. They didn't know the man being escorted out wasn't just another customer. They had no idea that he held the keys to the very kingdom they stood in. Not even Colin, the seasoned manager, could imagine that in less than 2 minutes, his entire world would implode and that those very moments would go on to rewrite the rulebook of high-end retail forever. Security reached out to touch the man's arm. A faint ripple of movement traveled across the room as the tension deepened. Even the sparkling chandeliers above seemed to dim slightly under the weight of what was unfolding. There was no shouting, no violence, just an overwhelming, oppressive silence, the kind that precedes a thunderstorm. And standing in the eye of it all was Damian Langston, calm, collected, and holding a secret that would shake this empire to its foundations. But this is just one story. One man. One moment. And the world is full of countless others still waiting to be heard. If this story moved you, stay with us. Because in our next video, we uncover another truth hidden behind polished doors where a silent act of courage turns into a movement that shakes an entire system. Don't miss what happens next. Click on the next video, hit that subscribe button, and be part of a community that believes in justice, dignity, and real change. We're just getting started. The towering glass windows of his Manhattan penthouse reflected the morning skyline like polished obsidian. Damian Langston stood still, adjusting the simple silver wedding band on his finger, the only piece of jewelry he wore despite being the owner of Aurora Jewelers, one of the most prestigious luxury jewelry chains in the United States. At 42, Damian was the picture of quiet success. The son of Jamaican immigrants who had worked double shifts to send him to school, he had built his empire from nothing. From scholarship student at Howard University to Harvard Business School graduate, every step of his journey had been hard-earned. Through smart investments, relentless work, and an unshakable belief in excellence over elitism, Damian had risen to the top of an industry that often tried to keep people like him out. Last year, he made headlines when he acquired Aurora Jewelers, a chain once seen as the pinnacle of exclusivity. And today, he was preparing to visit the flagship store on Fifth Avenue unannounced. "You sure you don't want Vanessa to pick up that anniversary gift for Tiana?" his assistant, Evan, called from the open kitchen. Damian glanced at the framed photo on his desk. Tiana, his wife of 15 years, smiling in the golden light of their wedding day. "No," he said with a smile. "I like to choose these things myself. 15 years of marriage deserves my full attention." He dressed deliberately, not to impress, but to remain invisible. Dark jeans, a navy cashmere sweater, and clean Italian loafers. No designer logos, no flashy watch, no obvious indicators of wealth. That had always been his way. His parents had taught him early that character should speak louder than branding. As CEO of Aurora, Damien occasionally conducted unannounced visits to his stores. He wanted to see how customers were treated when no one knew they were being watched. It wasn't enough for the company to look polished on paper, it had to feel right at the ground level. Today's visit had been on his calendar for weeks, though only he knew it. He'd appointed the current management team shortly after acquiring the brand, but he had not yet visited the flagship location since the recent rebranding was completed. Colin Prescott, the store manager, had come highly recommended by the previous ownership. 10 years of experience, they had said. A seasoned luxury retail professional with impeccable taste. Damien had kept an open mind. As the elevator dinged and he stepped into the lobby of his high-rise building, his driver, Malcolm, opened the car door with practiced efficiency. Damien nodded, slipping into the back seat of the black town car. Neither of them could have imagined what would await him at the store, or that the next 7 minutes of his life would spark a national reckoning. The Fifth Avenue flagship gleamed like a fortress of wealth and refinement. Polished marble floors stretched across the vast space, crystal chandeliers cast a gentle glow on display cases that held rare stones like sacred artifacts. Each diamond sparkled in carefully calibrated lighting, floating like stars in a velvet sky. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and aged leather, an engineered luxury scent meant to soothe high-net-worth clients into parting with small fortunes. At precisely 10:15 a.m., Damien Langston walked through the front doors. He nodded politely to the security guard, who barely looked up from his station. The guard's indifference was almost theatrical compared to what followed. 3 white customers had entered just moments before Damien. Each had been greeted instantly, smiling associates descending upon them with offers of champagne and warm welcomes. But Damien received no such treatment. Not a smile. Not a hello. Not even eye contact. He walked deeper into the store, past the more accessible displays, heading toward the high-end anniversary collection, his personal brainchild. Featuring rare pink diamonds sourced from Western Australia, each piece was handcrafted in platinum and priced from $50,000 to well over $100,000. Damien lingered there for 5 minutes, studying the pieces. He glanced up occasionally, scanning for any employee who might acknowledge his presence. None did. Sales associates breezed past, catering to newer arrivals who were white, well-dressed, and by unspoken assumption worthy. A woman in a fur coat hadn't even made it 5 steps inside before she was handed a glass of champagne. Damien remained invisible. Until a tall, silver-haired man finally approached, his eyes like polished steel, his posture stiff with self-importance. Colin Prescott had arrived. Colin Prescott approached with the confident stride of someone who believed he owned the room, even though he merely managed it. His tailored suit hugged his lean frame, and his polished shoes clicked softly on the marble floor. The air around him seemed to shift, growing colder as he arrived in front of Damien Langston. "Can I help you find something more appropriate for your budget?" Colin asked, his voice smooth but laced with condescension. His eyes moved deliberately over Damien's attire, simple, elegant, and notably devoid of brand labels. The judgment was immediate, sharpened by years of subtle discrimination masked as professionalism. Damien met his gaze evenly. "Actually, I'm interested in the pink diamond pendant from the anniversary collection," he replied, calm and composed. "My wife's birthday is coming up." Colin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sir, that particular piece is $75,000. His tone shifted, now audibly skeptical. "Perhaps something in our silver collection would be more suitable. We have some lovely items under $500. The humiliation was deliberate. Colin's voice wasn't loud, but it carried just far enough. A few nearby shoppers paused, pretending not to listen while clearly enjoying the unfolding scene. Some cast sidelong glances. Others smirked. Colin Prescott had unknowingly made a fatal miscalculation. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the man he was trying to humiliate could buy every single item in the store. In fact, he owned the building they were standing in. I'd still like to see the pendant, Damien said, his voice even but firm. There was tension behind his eyes, the kind that comes from a lifetime of biting your tongue in rooms not built for you. The restraint that had earned him respect in boardrooms was now keeping him grounded, though a fire simmered just beneath the surface. Colin's expression tightened. He stepped closer. Our policy requires income verification for any item over 50,000, he said smoothly, inventing a rule on the spot. Do you have bank statements or proof of income with you? A young sales associate named Paige, barely out of her 20s, stood nearby. She shifted awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. Her eyes bounced from Damien to her manager and back again. She said nothing, but her silence was telling. Damien replied calmly, I don't usually carry financial documents when I go shopping. And I haven't seen you ask anyone else for proof of income today. He nodded subtly toward the VIP area where a blonde woman was trying on a diamond bracelet. No ID, no paperwork, just smiles and champagne. Colin's jaw tightened. He leaned in, lowering his voice, but adding venom to each word. Listen. These items cost more than you'd make in a year. We're not a museum for window shoppers. People like you don't belong in Aurora Jewelers. Each syllable landed like a slap. The words weren't just meant to deny service, they were meant to diminish. The room seemed to grow quieter. Even the air stilled. Paige took a tentative step forward, but stopped cold when Colin shot her a look that could freeze glass. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Actually, Damien said, his voice cutting cleanly through the silence, I was planning to purchase the entire anniversary collection for a corporate event. 9 pieces. Totaling just over $650,000. A ripple passed through the customers within earshot. Colin laughed short, sharp, dismissive. Of course you were, he sneered, raising his voice. And I'm the Queen of England. He turned slightly and raised a hand. Jackson, please escort this gentleman out. He's causing a disturbance. The security guard who had greeted Damien with indifference earlier now approached with evident reluctance. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Damien stood still. His body language exuded dignity despite the simmering rage beneath the surface. In 15 years of visiting luxury boutiques across the globe, he had never once been asked to prove his financial worth before even touching a product. But he didn't lash out. Not yet. He had learned long ago that silence, when wielded by the right person, could be louder than any shout. Please don't touch me, Damien said firmly as the guard reached for his arm. I'll leave on my own. But Colin wasn't done. Jackson, remove him now. He's trespassing. The guard obeyed. His hand gripped Damien's forearm. And in that instant, everything changed. Take your hands off me, Damien said quietly, but with unmistakable authority, the kind that doesn't shout but commands attention nonetheless. I am Damien Langston. The security guard's grip slackened almost instantly, his confusion surfacing in the furrow of his brow. Wait. The Damien Langston. Behind the counter, Paige's eyes widened as recognition swept over her like a tidal wave. A small gasp escaped her lips. She knew that name. Everyone in the company should have known that name. Colin Prescott rolled his eyes. Sure you are, he scoffed. And I'm Jeff Bezos. He waved his hand impatiently. Jackson, I said, escort him out. But Damien remained composed. Calm. Controlled. He reached into his pocket and slowly pulled out his leather wallet. No one blinked. No one moved. Instead of a credit card, he held up a sleek black executive ID badge. The polished Aurora Jewelers logo glinted in the light. Beneath it, the words were clear and undeniable. Damien Langston, Chief Executive Officer. The air was vacuum-sealed silence. Damien turned the badge slowly so that everyone could see it. I purchased this company last year, he said, evenly. Every employee received a welcome email from me with this face attached. Jackson, the security guard, took a full step back, his face drained of color. Sir, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Damien raised a hand gently, not taking his eyes off Colin. It's not your fault. You were following orders from your manager. Colin's smug confidence vanished like smoke. His pale complexion now matched the polished marble floor. His lips parted, but no words came. This is some kind of prank, he muttered, reaching instinctively for the badge. Damien pulled it back with a calmness more terrifying than rage. I don't recall giving you permission to touch my personal property. He turned his gaze toward the stunned crowd of customers and employees frozen in place, suspended in disbelief. Would someone please call Gloria Bennett, our chief operating officer? Damien said, voice carrying through the showroom like a courtroom gavel. Her number is listed in the emergency contacts file. Paige stumbled into action, scrambling to the desk phone behind the counter. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. No one else moved. No one dared to speak. Customers had their phones out now, recording. What began as a quiet insult was transforming into a public reckoning. Moments later, Gloria's voice filled the store from the speakerphone. Damien? Is everything all right? You're supposed to be in the board meeting in an hour. Gloria, Damien replied, his voice steady and resolute. I'm at the Fifth Avenue store. Please instruct IT to pull security footage from the last 15 minutes and forward it directly to legal. Also, I need you to initiate Emergency Protocol 7. Around the store, several employees visibly reacted. Protocol 7 wasn't just a phrase, it was a nuclear button. It meant emergency termination of management personnel for cause. Colin Prescott looked like he might collapse. His knees buckled slightly, his mouth opened in desperation. Mr. Langston. Damien, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If I had only known. That, Damien interrupted coldly, is exactly the problem. His words cut sharper than any diamond. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with basic human dignity. Colin tried to respond, but only a weak sputter came out. Behind him, a display case wobbled as he stumbled backward, knocking it with his elbow. The crash echoed through the store like a gavel slamming down in judgment. Not one person moved to help him. Everyone now understood, the ground had shifted beneath them, and something monumental was happening right in front of their eyes. Damien looked around at the silent room, now filled with eyes, some stunned, some ashamed, some quietly vindicated. He cleared his throat and addressed the store directly. Everyone's attention, please. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that turns boardrooms, settles courtrooms, and now, redefined an entire industry. I need all staff to gather here. Customers, you're welcome to remain. What happens next isn't just about me. And everyone knew, a reckoning was at hand. Gloria Bennett arrived at the store within minutes. Her heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor as she stepped into the frozen showroom. Her breath caught when she took in the scene: Damien Langston standing tall in the center, staff huddled in silence, and Colin Prescott visibly unraveling beside a toppled display case. She had worked with Damien for 7 years. And in all that time, she had never seen the fire that now simmered behind his calm expression. Brad, Damien said, using the store manager's first name deliberately, stripping away any formal pretense, would you like to explain why you attempted to remove me from my own store? Colin tried to straighten his posture, but the weight of exposure was too much. His voice cracked as he began, Mr. Langston, if I had known who you were. Stop, Damien said flatly, cutting him off mid-sentence. That excuse makes it worse. Colin blinked, confused. You're saying you only treat people with respect if they have power over you? Damien's voice echoed through the now silent room, hitting every ear like a judge's gavel. There was no answer. Only the soft hum of the overhead lighting and the sound of phones still quietly recording. Gloria, Damien said without looking at her, please pull up the security footage from the last hour. I want it played on the main screen. The store's central display, usually filled with looping images of shimmering diamonds, flickered and changed. A series of security feeds appeared. Angles from different corners of the store showed Damien entering, being ignored, and eventually humiliated. Every snub. Every sneer. Every calculated slight played back in high definition for all to witness. When the footage reached the moment Colin had called security, audible gasps rippled through the room. "This isn't just about me," Damien said, stepping forward. "Let me ask all the staff here a question, and I want honesty." He scanned their faces. "How many of you have witnessed similar treatment of customers based on how they look? Their clothes, their accent, their skin color?" Silence. Then slowly, one hand rose. "Paige." Then another. And another. Soon, more than half the employees had their hands in the air. "I built Aurora Jewelers on the belief that luxury is not about exclusion," Damien continued, "but about excellence. And today, we failed." He turned back to Colin, whose face was now a pale canvas of dread. "Colin Prescott," Damien said, his voice resolute, "you're fired. Effective immediately." Colin stepped forward, desperation rising in his voice. "You can't do this. I have a mortgage, a family. So do the countless qualified applicants you've likely turned away because they didn't match your image of who belongs in luxury," Damien responded. "Gloria will escort you to collect your belongings. Your final check will include 2 weeks severance. That's more generosity than you showed to customers you deemed unworthy." Security, now looking mortified, moved to stand beside Colin. He hesitated, then turned toward Damien, his face flushed with humiliation. "This isn't fair," he growled. "One mistake shouldn't cost me everything." Damien stared him down with piercing steadiness. "It wasn't one mistake. It was your entire mindset. A series of choices you made, again and again. Today, they caught up with you." As Colin disappeared into the back office, the room remained frozen, customers watching in awe, employees stunned into silence. Damien turned to the rest of the staff. His tone softened, but not his resolve. "Everyone gather around," he said. A nervous semicircle formed. Some staff wiped away tears. Others looked at the floor. "What happened here today was a failure at every level," Damien began. "Not just Colin's failure, but our failure to build a culture where such behavior is unthinkable." He looked to Gloria. "Effective immediately, this store will close for 2 weeks. During that time, every employee will undergo comprehensive retraining." There were murmurs of uncertainty. Eyes widened. "You will all be paid in full," he added. Relief visibly passed through the group. "But when we reopen," Damien continued, "things will be different. We'll implement mandatory bias training. We'll use mystery shoppers from every background. And most importantly, we will have zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind." Paige stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Langston. I want to apologize. I knew what Colin was doing was wrong. But I was scared to speak up. I didn't want to lose my job." Damien nodded thoughtfully. "Fear is a powerful silencer. But part of our new culture will include anonymous, protected channels for reporting issues. That fear ends here." He looked at each of them, one by one. "Some of you may not be comfortable with these changes. That's okay. Gloria will accept resignations with 2 weeks severance for anyone who wishes to leave." No one moved. "For those who stay," Damien said, "I promise you this, Aurora will no longer be defined by gatekeeping and elitism. From this day forward, we will stand for excellence, not exclusion." And in that moment, a wave of transformation swept through the room. A store once built on intimidation was now beginning its rebirth, one rooted in dignity, fairness, and truth. 6 months later, the Fifth Avenue flagship store of Aurora Jewelers no longer whispered exclusivity, it sang transformation. Gone were the intimidating glass dividers that once separated customers by perception rather than purpose. Gone were the cold stares and curated silence. In their place stood soft lighting, warm welcomes, and displays that invited exploration, not judgment. The diamonds still shimmered. The chandeliers still dazzled. But the air now felt lighter. Human. Outside, a small crowd gathered for the grand reopening ceremony. Press cameras clicked. Passers-by stopped to glimpse what all the buzz was about. On a sleek podium near the entrance, Damian Langston adjusted his lapel, then stepped forward to address the crowd. "Welcome," he said, his voice rich with sincerity. "Welcome to the new Aurora." A ripple of applause followed, but Damian raised his hand gently. 6 months ago, something happened inside these walls, something ugly, something painful. But pain has the power to reveal truth. And truth, when we face it, can change everything. He gestured behind him, toward the newly redesigned store. This space used to reflect who we thought belonged in luxury. Now, it reflects what luxury should be, not about keeping people out, but about welcoming everyone who values excellence. As he cut the ceremonial ribbon, cameras flashed, and the new Aurora officially opened its doors. But what followed wasn't just a media event, it was a human one. The story of Damian's confrontation had gone viral within hours of the incident. Security footage leaked by an anonymous employee, though Damian quietly suspected it was, page spread like wildfire. Over 50 million views within the first week. Hashtags like #LuxuryForAll and #AuroraAwakens trended for days. Late-night hosts talked about it. Morning shows invited Damian to speak. He didn't hide. He leaned in. He appeared on national news, not to shame but to educate, to open a dialogue. His calm, candid words became a balm for those long unheard and a challenge to those who had benefited from silence. Industry analysts predicted backlash. Instead, Aurora's sales rose by 38%. Customers from all walks of life, many stepping into a luxury store for the first time, flocked to support what the brand now represented. Inside the store that day, Damian walked slowly past a new display near the entrance, a glass case not labeled with price tags, but with purpose. The Equity Collection. Each piece in the collection had been designed by emerging artists from underrepresented communities: Black, Latinx, Asian, Indigenous, LGBTQ+. The designs were bold, inspired, and unlike anything traditional luxury brands dared to showcase. "This is where true brilliance begins," read the inscription. "Talent knows no boundaries." "Mr. Langston," a voice interrupted gently. It was Paige, now wearing a sleek name tag that read Assistant Manager. She stood beside a young black woman who looked no older than 20, nervously clutching a leather-bound portfolio to her chest. "This is Sienna," Paige said. "She's a design student at Parsons. She's been admiring the Equity Collection." Damian turned to her, smiling warmly. "Sienna, welcome to Aurora. Are you a jewelry designer?" Sienna nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. I'm working on my portfolio, but I wasn't sure if a place like this would ever, have room for someone like me." Damian's smile deepened. "It absolutely does. We're not just building a store, we're building a movement." He led her to a sleek screen mounted on the wall. It displayed details of Aurora's apprenticeship initiative, a new program connecting aspiring designers from underserved backgrounds with professional mentorship, training, and the opportunity to have their work featured. "Talent belongs everywhere," Damian told her. "Sometimes the world just needs a little reminder." As he watched Paige lead Sienna up the staircase to the design studio, Damian felt something shift, not in the store, but in his chest. A weight had lifted. A wound had started to close. Gloria appeared beside him, watching the scene unfold. "Was it worth it?" she asked softly. Damian didn't hesitate. He looked around at the diverse staff now engaging happily with customers. At the laughing child tugging her mother toward a glimmering necklace. At the elderly man sipping sparkling water while admiring a ring for his anniversary. He nodded slowly. The most valuable things we create, he said, aren't made of gold or diamonds. They're the moments when we choose to be better than our past. When we build something that will outlast us. Outside, the sunlight caught the letters etched into the glass facade. Aurora, a name once associated with exclusion, now stood as a beacon. A promise. A light. And it was just getting started. Have you ever stood in a place where you once felt invisible and watched it change? Damian Langston had. 6 months ago, he had walked into a store he owned, dressed not in power, but in simplicity. And because of that, he was treated as if he were nothing. Because of his skin. Because of assumptions. Because of a system that had mistaken polish for character. But now, everything was different. As Damian stood on the upper level of the Aurora flagship store, overlooking the crowd of customers below, he didn't see marble floors or diamond-studded displays. He saw stories: the father surprising his daughter with her first pair of pearl earrings. The immigrant couple browsing engagement rings, holding hands nervously. The young designer sketching in the corner, eyes lit with possibility. And for the first time in his long, battle-worn journey through boardrooms and barriers, Damian didn't feel like an exception. He felt like a bridge. A bridge between what the world had been and what it could still become. He turned and walked down the staircase, his steps quiet but steady, like a conductor guiding the final note of a long symphony. Outside, a small boy pressed his face to the glass window, marveling at the sparkle within. Damian paused and smiled. That child wouldn't know what happened here 6 months ago. But someday, someone would tell him. And when they did, he would hear a different kind of story, not about exclusion, but about redemption. About a place where someone stood up, quietly but powerfully, and changed everything. Because Damian hadn't just corrected a mistake. He had rewritten a legacy. And not with rage. Not with revenge. But with resolve. And now, it's your turn. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in a store, in a school, in a waiting room, in your own workplace? Have you seen someone be judged before they even opened their mouth? Have you stayed silent, or spoken up? Drop a comment below. Type justice if you believe respect should never depend on wealth, skin color, or appearance. Tell us where you're watching from. Share this story because someone out there needs to know they're not alone. That change is possible. And if this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you hopeful, hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories of resilience, justice, and the quiet power of standing your ground. Because as Damian Langston proved, sometimes the most valuable thing you can wear is your dignity. And the brightest light in the room is truth.